Close your eyes. Picture a caveman. You already did it before I finished the sentence. He's running, spear in hand, chasing something huge across the plain. Now picture a cave woman. She's sitting, probably by a fire, holding a baby, waiting for him to come home. Here's the strange part. That image isn't ancient. It's not even prehistoric. It's about 150 years old, and there's a growing pile of bones that says it might be one of the biggest stories modern science inherited and never bothered to double-check. That's strange. Unless we've been digging up the evidence and seeing exactly what we expected to see, instead of what was actually buried there, three things are coming. The hunting tool that should never have been buried with a woman, except it kept happening. The exact assumption scientists never stopped to question. And the invention, 10,000 years later, that actually built the passive, waiting woman we now assume always existed. Picture a hunter. Call her Tessa. Fast. Good lungs. No, good patience, really. Today she ran an animal into the ground. 15 miles until it just gave up before she did. She comes back to camp, rips the meat free with her hands. Nobody's chewing, nobody's talking, no birds even, just the fire. She splits the meat, hands the best cut to the oldest woman in the group, the one who can't run anymore but remembers every drought of the last 40 years. Nobody says anything. Nobody even looks surprised. It's just Tuesday. Tessa didn't wrestle that animal down. She didn't need to. She just kept following it, hour after hour, with the kind of patience that has nothing to do with how much you can lift. That's called persistence hunting. And patience like that doesn't split neatly by sex. So, if hunting was never really a strength contest, why have we spent over a century assuming only men did it? Imagine Tessa, buried with her own spear, thousands of years from now. That's almost exactly what happened at a real site in Peru, called Willamaya Pacha. Archaeologists found a burial with hunting tools beside the bones. Spear points, knives, laid out the way they had been laid out at dozens of sites before. They expected another male hunter. The bones came back. Female. One site. Doesn't prove every ancient hunter was a woman. It proves something smaller, and honestly stranger. For a long time, many excavations simply assumed the answer instead of checking it. Some of those famous male hunters weren't male. There's a name for the habit that caused this. Weapon equals man. Spear in the grave, assume male. Carried forward, excavation after excavation. I want to be careful here. This isn't a story where men hunted nothing and women did everything. That's just trading one oversimplified myth for another. What actually happened was messier, roles more fluid than either version admits. Gathered plants likely made up most of the calories in a lot of these societies. Gathering wasn't some mindless chore done one-handed with a baby on a hip. It meant knowing hundreds of edible and dangerous plants. Every season, every poison, every medicine. Tomorrow Tessa won't hunt. She'll spend 8 hours looking for roots instead. Same woman, different job, just as dangerous in its own way. She comes back almost empty-handed. The ground's too dry this season. Tomorrow somebody else goes out and finds enough for everyone. Miss one poisonous leaf, and your child gets sick. Pick the wrong route too early in the season, and the whole group pays for it. That knowledge was the steady backbone the whole group leaned on, every day while hunting succeeded or failed on its own terms. None of it happened with one woman raising a child alone, either. Human babies stay helpless for years, longer than almost any other animal on Earth. So care spread across the whole group. There's a word for it. Alloparenting. Tessa hunting, gathering, leading. She wasn't doing any of that in spite of having children. She was doing it inside a system built to make it possible. So where did passive cave woman actually come from if it wasn't the bones? It came from something that happened 10,000 years later. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then the world broke. 10,000 years ago, we stopped following the seasons. We started farming. Imagine food that spoils in 2 days. You can't hoard it even if you wanted to. So you share it, no other option. That's how almost all of human history worked. You find it, you eat it, before it ever has the chance to rot. Farming broke that completely. For the first time, food could last. Imagine a man filling a jar with grain. Just grain. Settling. One handful at a time. Then he does something nobody before him had ever done. He locks it. Nobody else touches it. Over generations, watch what grows out of that one locked jar. And the moment something can be locked away and passed down, one brutal question shows up that no nomadic band ever needed to ask. Whose child is that? Mother always knows, father only ever wonders. So why did the same rules show up on different continents that never even met each other? Because wealth that lasted began to matter. And lasting wealth needed heirs. Heirs needed certainty. Everything else followed from there. Rules, shame, control over who a woman could be with and when. Nobody agrees on exactly how much of the story this explains on its own, but it's one of the stronger threads we have because it shows up again and again in places that never compared notes. And to be clear, if the bones had pointed the other way, that's the story we'd be telling instead. This isn't about picking a side. It's about checking what we actually dug up. This is the part that should genuinely change how you see the woman by the fire from the start of this video. That familiar picture isn't ancient. Much of it began taking shape after agriculture. A woman whose movement, whose work, whose entire world got narrowed on purpose to protect a man's certainty about his bloodline and his locked jar of grain. Now imagine Tessa's granddaughter, generations later, standing behind a fence that didn't exist in her grandmother's lifetime. Think about a little girl who loves climbing trees. Somewhere along the way, someone tells her to be careful, to act like a lady. A museum she visits on a school trip shows her a diorama of a man with a spear and a woman behind him, sitting. By the time she's grown, the whole world around her has quietly agreed on who's supposed to do what. None of that started with her, and none of it started in some cave either. So go back to the woman by the fire from the start of tonight. Sitting. Waiting. That picture isn't a memory of who we were. It's a souvenir from a system that needed her to stay still, and then quietly told everyone it had always been that way. So the next time someone tells you that a woman staying quietly out of the way is simply human nature, remember the bones in Peru. Remember the locked jar. Remember the woman by the fire, and ask yourself honestly whether she was ever really there at all. She wasn't waiting by the fire. She was the one who brought it food. The old woman who remembered everything is gone now. The fence remembers nothing at all.